All righty, we are live for another episode of Sports to Suits. I am your host, Amanda Banks, and I have the honor to highlight former athletes that are crushing it in business. And this week's episode is no different. This is going to be an awesome and fun conversation because I've got Brendan Doherty on the line with me, but this is his first ever live or podcast. So if you are listening in, definitely show Brendan some love. Drop us a comment. Tell us where you're tuning in from so we can give you guys some love. But while people are tuning in, Brendan, why don't you give a little bit of background about yourself so the audience can get to know you a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Please be nice on the comments today. So, um, as Amanda already mentioned, my name is Brendan Doherty. I'm actually from the northwest suburbs of Chicago originally. Spent about the first 28 years of my life there, and then I transitioned into Vegas for about a year. Tried that out, and if you've never been there or tried to live there, it's not an easy thing to do. So decided to transition here to Nashville, where I call home base now, for about 4.5 years. And my background is mainly hospitality driven. Obviously, sports being the key to growth and as a child and growing up. And I mean, you name the sport and I played it.
And we're going to talk about this because we were just chatting about it a few minutes ago, and it is super impressive. I mean, I talked to a lot of athletes that have kind of dabbled in a lot of different sports, but you've played like consistently tons of different sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's just depending on what age gap we talk about there. Not having enough time in the year to play every sport was the only issue I had growing up until after high school. So, with that being said, I played the majority of my career in Chicago or the Chicagoland area, and then kind of decided to work instead of going to school. So that was a big decision that I made with my father. I had a very strong sit down conversation and said, yeah, I had two options, and I still remember the sit-down conversation. It was go to work or go to school, and I'm sure a lot of people have had that same conversation with one of their family members as well, and that sparked a lot of things for me. And I drove straight into the hospitality world of things. Started as a server at TGI Fridays, and I worked there for a lot of years, and moved my way up to management. Trained hundreds of bartenders across the nation, and competed in a lot of different flair competitions and stuff, and just continued the growth in management across 3 states. And then I landed here, went into distribution side of things for brands of alcohol, because that's where I found the passion in it. And I linked up with my business partner, Jordan Williams, who was just on the show, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago.
He was on last week.
Yeah, excellent. So he wanted me to get on as well. And we have this synergy together in the same, pretty similar background and growth. And mine's a little bit more on the operational side of things, which is as me and Amanda touched base on earlier, was a little untraditional, I guess, as most people coming from sports to business.
So let's talk about the sports background. And once again, if you're tuning in and you're new to the show, definitely drop us a comment so that we can give a shout out to you. If you've continued to be a routine listener, feel free to reach out with some questions, because we typically dive into questions as well. But tell us a little bit about just like your background as far as the sports. Like, what sport was your initial sport that you got into, and kind of talk a little bit about your journey in sports specifically as a kiddo.
Sure. Yeah. My main sport my whole life was actually soccer. My grandfather played for the Scottish national team in Scotland growing up. He's in a lot of pictures and stuff growing up. And my mother was born in Scotland, moved here when she was 16. And that's been a big part of my life. I mean, before I could walk, my grandfather would toss a little softball on my head, and I would just bounce off my head, and he'd roll it, pick it up, and just do it over and over and over. So that's kind of the life that I lived. And then growing up in Chicago, I was a huge Bulls fan in the early 90s. Being a huge Jordan fan as well. And my dad would put a little basketball hoop up on the side of the door and, call my name down every time the game started, jumping on the table and stuff. And, I come from a great household and a great sports family household as well. Started playing those two sports, and then transitioned into football for about 2 years when I was 12 years old, because I had a little bit too much aggression. And my mother wanted me to take that out on people with pads instead of people without pads. And me and my family used to get together with all my cousins. We're all about 1 year apart, and we would play football in the front yard, and just had a love for it and loved hitting people, and kind of grew from there. Transitioned back into soccer, played basketball and baseball in high school. played travel ball, baseball until I was about 18, played basketball until my junior year in high school, and then continued soccer after college as well.
So there are a lot of people that tune into this show that have young kiddos that play sports, and I am one of those. I have a stepson that plays college baseball, and I have a daughter that plays travel soccer. And the amount of intensity that is starting to happen even younger and younger and younger with the focus on a single sport, I would love to pick your brain on this one. So if anybody's tuning in that has young kids, you start playing travel ball, flag football, travel soccer. I mean, they start kids at like tiny ages. Like, what are your thoughts on being super hyper focused on one specific sport as a young kid?
Yeah, so I think that being able to play multiple sports made me choose where my passion was. And I learned a lot from other sports and was able to put that into soccer, which was my main sport. I tell people I don't have a lot of regrets in life. And my friends and family always bring up the 2-year gap in soccer because, as everybody has these aspirations to go pro, and started looking at the Scottish national team and the Irish national team coming from those heritages, and being able to hold records in high school for most goals scored and transitioning into speed roles instead of center mid. And, it was a fun way to do it, but I learned a lot from basketball as well. And baseball, the teamwork, the being able to trust other people on a field and kind of rely on them to do their job was something that I learned from multiple sports and not just one.
And you did gymnastics too, right?
If that's what we want to call it. Yeah. So I was very, very young. I believe it was probably when I was like 3 to about 7. And one day my coach was pressuring me to do the splits, and I pulled both my groin muscles, and my mom had a panic attack breakdown in the waiting room, and I just never came back.
She's like, it's done.
Yep. So
but gymnastics, so I am a huge advocate of anybody that plays sports to do gymnastics. It's great for hand-eye coordination, flexibility, focus, motivation, discipline. So I am a huge fan of putting kids in gymnastics. Just let them play, or Ninja Warrior classes and letting them play, because it's such a great sport that can catapult you into additional sports. And even now, like, I was a pretty strong athlete in gymnastics, and I love to golf, but I used a lot of the background that I had from gymnastics and learning how to golf because it's very similar in nature. I would imagine that you're a pretty solid athlete regardless of what sport you're playing.
Yeah, and that was a lot of my friends hated it because a lot of sports came easy to me at the level of high school. I mean, after that, obviously, I didn't grow. I was kind of short, so I'm about 5'9". And, I had 4% body fat when I graduated high school, and that's all went downhill after injuries and stuff. So I was obsessed. I was, the second I woke up, I was asking my parents if I could call kids in the neighborhood and just try to find whatever game and whatever sport I could play in at any age range. I mean,
do you still play?
I do not. I am contemplating the idea in the next couple of years, stepping back into a men's indoor league for soccer. But I blew up my quad when my junior year in high school. Goalie came out and kind of hit me in the quad with the cleat, and it just split. And I was never able to plant again on that leg too strongly in order to play. So I kind of gave up a little bit after that, and as I knew I lost a step. So I'm contemplating it. I play softball. I mean, now I play as people call it, the old man's game of golf. But realistically, that is very difficult. Started seeing a chiropractor just so I could do it. So
we've got some people popping in here. Jason is a huge supporter of the show and always submits the best questions. So Jason is asking, from your days of playing sports, who was your favorite coach and why? I love this question.
Oh, geez. Overall, I'd probably have to go Lou Holtz at Notre Dame. And I say that solely because my father grew up in South Bend, Indiana. The head baseball coach was my grandparents' neighbors. I grew up trying to get on the field to play soccer with all them. And during that 88 championship was actually the year that I was born. So my dad, I would always tell me, Notre Dame's last championship, and being able to do stuff like this and just kind of growing up in that area so close to the university. And my name is Brendan Doherty, so very Irish. So kind of had to be an Irish fan, Notre Dame fan, true and true all the way across all the boards. So Lou, what he did with that team and the passion that he had in the community that I later on in life learned to love, and kind of how my dad helped raise me, was the same way Lou kind of treated his players. I mean, he held them accountable, but he was there for them no matter what.
So we've got Lisa popping in, once an athlete, always an athlete. I love that. And then we've got Jose, who has also been a guest on the show. So Jose played elite level soccer as well. I wholeheartedly wish I had done gymnastics. Praying for more agility and flexibilities these days. Soccer beat me up. Gymnastics beat me up though. So we've got Jamie popping in. Love the perspective of what you gain from playing multiple sports. So let's dive into, your journey from sports to actually getting out of sports into the business world was a little bit different because you didn't go the traditional education route. And I think it is so critical for anybody that's listening, as well as student athletes, to tune into that everybody has a different educational path. And so share with the audience a little bit about your journey in education and maybe some lessons that you learned there, but how you transitioned over to business.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, my father sat me down and kind of had a realization moment and decided that if I was going to go into work, I could, or I'd have to go to school and get an education and play. And what I chose to do was I wanted to work. I needed to be hands-on. I needed to be out of the house. I needed to do different things with my hands and learn a different thing, because my life was just sports forever. Every second of every day was another sport, and I didn't know anything else. So at about 19 years old, right after high school, I decided to go and try to get a serving job, as my sister worked at a Chili's. And I was like, I'm not going to work there. I'll work at the one right across the street. So we did that. And instead of going to college, I chose to learn that trade in the hospitality world. And what I was able to do was learn the teamwork that I brought with sports into a serving job, which I didn't think would help at all. And it did. And it actually gave me a sense of purpose in that world to grow and be better and challenge myself. And I saw these bartenders and I wanted to be a better bartender. And then I wanted to be the head bartender. Then I wanted to be the manager. And I saw that with the hospitality world, which I never saw outside of sports, and focused and realized at 21, I wasn't going to go pro and I wasn't going to do any of these things. Still can play recreationally, but I can focus on something else that, captured my heart. And that's the route that I decided to choose.
And so I think every single person needs to go and work in a restaurant at least once in their life. What are some things that you learned from the field and taking it into like the business community? Because once again, I think everybody should at least spend a couple of months serving, bartending, getting exposed to the hospitality industry, because I learned so much being in that environment. But what are some lessons that you learned from that straight out of the gate? So things that you took from sports and applied into your serving roles.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. Hospitality and retail is two crazy beasts that if you've never done it, you have no idea. It's brutal to be able to transition.
And then we've got Jose popping in saying 100% are in a call center or customer support. Same thing.
Exactly. It's tough dealing with people's customers' complaints. And, I was able to, lucky enough, I was able to go to a seminar for TGI Fridays and Carlson Group. And they came out with a phrase that I still keep to this day. And it's BLAST. It's BLAST. And it's how I was able to address customer complaints or issues in the hospitality world. And that stands for believe, listen, apologize, solve, and then thank. And if you go talking to somebody along those lines, whether it's in sales or operations or management or ownership or C-level, it doesn't matter. As long as you go in believing that what they're going to tell you is the truth, you listen to them, you apologize for what happened, then you offer a solution and thank them for their business. And if you do that 99% of the time, you'll be successful and you won't have the headache and the complaints that follow.
So were you given a clear and concise pathway on leadership development opportunities in the hospitality space, or did you just kind of navigate that on your own? Because I think that was one of the challenges that I had was like you come in as a server, then you come in as a bartender when somebody is no longer there, right? And then you may get promoted, but there's really not. I didn't have the experience of having a very structured, routine leadership development plan. And that was one thing I struggled in the hospitality industry with because I was used to a lot of structure. And so was that something that you experienced as well?
Yeah, so the structure from sports to going into the service side of things, for example, it the transition was a lot more simple than I thought it was going to be, but I was able to kind of communicate with my team members and use that instead of trying to be on my own. And I was able to use the tools given to me to succeed a lot easier, which I never realized until probably I was 30. I never knew that people struggled with something like that because it was just so second nature to me growing up playing sports that you had that team around you and you used them. And nowadays, a lot of people are out for themselves. And being all the way from serving into a C-level role with my business partner, I also did not start the company. I came into a startup, so that's a little bit of a different trajectory with my growth in my business. But that's helped me a lot to be able to use the knowledge and the expertise in other fields to grow.
So aside from the blast, what else did you learn at the entry level roles that you were in, as well as like the team? Or like, were there any other lessons that you learned in that experience?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure too many of them, but that's the key for me was teamwork, and relying on your staff and your team. When I went into management, I had a hard time transitioning from somebody's friend to their boss. So that was an issue for me because I was still hanging out with them. They were all my friends prior because I grew up with them. So then the transition into being somebody's boss was difficult because you're almost the coach on the field now.
How did you learn that? Like, was that just something that you had to navigate? Because I know that, like, in my experience, they would promote a lot of people just based on some of the work that they did, but there wasn't really a good educational program or like navigating how do you actually lead a team. Did you use your background in sports or did you have some type of educational program? Did you read books? Like, how did you go from being in those roles into a management role?
Yeah, I had a couple managers that were a mentor of mine that kind of helped me through a lot of the transitional pieces, but I was able to use a lot from sports to be able to do that because I can accept failure. So I wasn't able to transition that right away, and I lost friendships because of it. But it hurts, but you learn from it, you grow from it, and you talk to the people that have been there and done it before. And as long as you do it with an open mind, I truly think you can be as more successful than you think.
So we've got another question popping in here from Jason. He said, transitioning into the business world, what is some of the best advice that you had received?
I would say be patient and failure is expected. And then there's always 100 great ideas left on a shelf. I think that once you find your lane, being able to focus on 1 to 2 things and really drive it home successfully, everything else will fall in line.
I love that. Okay, so you went from management into other leadership roles, but now you've jumped into entrepreneurship. So although you're in a leadership role, you've kind of taken this transition from hospitality, gone into entrepreneurship to some sense. So share a little bit about what you do now so that we can dive into like the entrepreneurship side of things.
Yeah. So after hospitality, I actually went into the distribution side for one of the local distribution houses in Middle Tennessee and sold a bunch of different brands for Anheuser-Busch and multiple wine and spirits. And then I took the jump into entrepreneurship because I saw the need for the services that we offer. And we were able to fight for the little guys is kind of why we do what we do. There's a lot of brands out there that have brands. People have money, but they don't know how to do anything with it or how to sell it and get it across the country. And they're just getting buried by the big brands that have $1 million budgets.
Yep.
So that is the passion behind why I went into the entrepreneur side of this with my business partner, because I know that world and I know that people need people like me to fight for them.
And you're in the operational side. So I did interview Jordan, who's your business partner, last week, and he's very much on like the sales strategy, marketing side. And although you play in that role, you're very much on the operational side of things. And so we see a lot of athletes that go into sales or marketing or media because that's what they believe their career pathway is. But I also want to advocate for other roles like operational roles, because there are certain skill sets that translate from sport into business in that capacity as well. So share some of those skill sets. Like, why would you advocate for athletes going into more of an operational side of things?
Yeah, when I didn't realize that not as many people went into the operational side of things until we had our conversation a little bit before we started. And I truly have been thinking about it the whole time, because the main thing that I see is the structure. And once you have a goal, you're so goal oriented to get it done, and you hold people accountable, but you also help them get to that goal. And that's the definition of operations to me. So sales and everything, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. However, the operations side to me is just something that I've done my whole life. So
It's a process. Like, operations is very much process oriented, numbers oriented, structure, routine. You have to probably pull a lot of that discipline over to the commitment to a goal every single time, and doing the small tasks that lead up to the big tasks.
Yeah.
Right? I would imagine I'm not an operational person, so I don't know, but I would imagine that that's what.
Yeah, it really is. It's tying everything together and then creating a plan to get it done. And that's the only thing that matters, is getting it done. And if you have that mindset, I mean, you do whatever it takes. And I think in sports, you do whatever it takes to win or succeed. And I won't talk about the participation and stuff like that that's happening nowadays, because I don't have kids, so I'm not going to speak on it.
No participation trophies.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think it's a good idea, because it doesn't teach what I've lived my whole life in that operation side of being able to kind of do that. But like I said, I don't have kids, so I support everybody else's decision to do what they need to do.
Okay, so we've got another question. This is interesting. So what advice would you give a young entrepreneur regarding what success looks like?
That's a great question. Truthfully, success, I can't put one or two words on what success is, because I think success is different for everybody.
Totally agree.
And some people are driven from money or family or fun toys, big houses. Truthfully, mine is happiness. And what I want to do is just be happy, whether it's I make $40,000 a year or $4 million a year. That's not really what drives me, but it is a bonus, right? So everybody kind of thinks about that monetary value. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't in the forefront of my mind a lot. But truthfully, I think success is finding the right role, the right company, and the right team around you where you're happy and you actually enjoy doing what you're doing.
And like you said, success is totally different from person to person. And if you are constantly comparing what other people define as success, you'll always be miserable. Mm-hmm. I learned this very early on in my career, because I was told this is what success looks like, and I just followed that pathway. But the reality is everybody's pathway is different. It's not the same. And if you're defining success and comparing yourself to what other people define as success, then you'll be miserable, most likely.
Yeah, I agree.
So we have another question. I want to make sure I get to these questions. He said, so Jason asked, what keeps you pushing forward towards continuous growth and improvement?
I would say really it's the passion that I have for the people that I'm helping. I truly believe the service that we're offering is helping people communicate or drive through getting over their speed bumps, I should say. And being able to help these smaller brands live the life that and their passion and their dream is something that makes me excited to wake up in the morning. And if that's all I need to be happy, then that's all I need to be happy.
Well, let's talk about that, because there's a lot of people that ask about brand awareness, individual brand, company brand. There's a lot of talk consistently about what is the best way to stand out as a small business, or stand out if you're just kind of launching your own personal brand. So I want to pick your brain on that a little bit, because you guys help other organizations amplify their brands to compete with larger brands, right?
Yeah. Yes. So really, you need a story and show your passion behind why you created your brand. If you do that, you will be successful. Don't think that you're going to be Terramana or Totino's in 6 to 12 months. It's not realistic.
Doesn't work that way. at all.
These liquor brands they had millions of dollars in the backing, and they paid all this stuff and marketing, and it's a fluke. And that's not the business that we created to help brands like that grow. We do have an internal marketing company as well that will help kind of grow and do all these things with these brands driven towards the beverage field. But truthfully, if you have a story and you're open to suggestions in the market, because the market changes daily, and my fight is to make sure that you don't get taken advantage of, because a lot of distributors will take advantage of you if given. That's not their own fault. That's just a margin number. So we were able to speak that language for them.
So do you think that it's important for an individual that's working for an organization to have a personal brand as well?
How so? Sorry.
So like for me, Sports to Suits is our company brand. And then I also put out individual messaging and other things to that nature. And so it's kind of a differentiating factor to some degree, where you're seeing individuals put out individualized personal brands versus company branding. So separating out the two a little bit. So do you think that that is a critical component to success with some small organizations at this point?
Absolutely. You have to believe in your brand and grow your brand and do everything like that, but you are also your own brand. So you can push a product, I can push your product for you, but the reason I'm able to get in front of these people to do it is because I have my own brand. And, I have those relationships and the respect in these different communities where I pick up a phone and somebody's going to answer it, instead of you waiting 6 months to get somebody to send an email back and says, we'll talk to you in 3 months. That is what I've learned to be able to, I continuously go out almost 3 times a week into different restaurants and stuff in our local market and meet up local reps and talk to events and talk to these suppliers, because I need to know what's happening in the market. And that is me personally. I do that on my own dime, my own time, and I love that. And that's
so this is critical, because you're a chief operating officer. Typically, those folks are a little bit behind the scenes, and that is not. I see a lot of leadership teams right now, especially roles like COOs or CTOs or CIOs, that are having to be more forward facing rather than staying behind the scenes. So it sounds like you're taking kind of that stance as well, of being out in the marketplace and figuring out trends and developing relationships, and not just staying behind the scenes in your organization.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned from hospitality, was if you're not willing to do it yourself, you can't expect somebody else to do it. So that's why you see a lot of managers on the line cooking and cleaning the bathrooms, mopping the floors. That's my business model. That's the way that my father and my mother raised me, and I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself.
But it also, like, you're building your personal brand, you're also helping establish the company brand and getting the name out there. So it's kind of like a twofold kind of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought of it as doing both brands. I appreciate you letting me know that, because now I feel better about
well, it's important. It's critical.
Now I'll be able to tell my girlfriend this is why I'm going out to all these places every night drinking. So,
well, I don't know about that.
No, I won't blame you, I promise. But I do enjoy it. I have a lot of fun, and it really is a fun world to be a part of, as long as you just believe in it. I really do.
So let's talk about, so when you go in as a server, so you were an elite level athlete, which is top. And then going into your career, you have to start at the bottom again. And I talk to a lot of athletes that struggle with this, of thinking, I'm going to go into the labor market and I'm going to have these elite level jobs where I'm making bukus of money. And that is traditionally not the case, unless you're like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. Yeah. So, and we're not all Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. So when that happens, so talk a little bit about that, because there's a ton of student athletes that listen in on the show. And I want to encourage them that it is okay to start in an entry-level role and grow your career from there.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me when I transitioned out of hospitality management. I went into a relief role, selling alcohol, because there wasn't a position open, but that was the career choice that I decided to take, and I was low man on the totem pole. And I think if you take it in stride and you try to listen to everybody trying to teach you, they're genuinely trying to help you. And the more you can kind of learn from them, the easier the transition and quicker you're going to move up in that company.
So we've got Lisa tuning in here saying coaches play a huge part in human development. And I could not agree more with this. And we were talking a little bit about coaching and mentorship earlier, but I want to dive into that with you because I think that there's not, like, in large corporations, there's typically mentorship programs, leadership development programs. There's resources and very specific career pathways in some of these companies. And typically in hospitality, you don't necessarily get that. And so what are your thoughts on coaching or mentorship specifically in the industry? And what are some resources that you've used in the past to help elevate your career within the industry?
I've used my dad more times than I can count. My dad did. He was in sales his whole life, and he's kind of been my sounding board forever. And I'm lucky to have him. And I know a lot of people don't have that relationship or don't have their fathers to rely on. And I truly am lucky to be able to do that. But I was able to find my own coaches and mentors in each field. I had in the same restaurant, I had one mentor as a server and another mentor as a bartender, and they were two different managers. You see different sides, and they teach you different ways, and take whatever they can give you and take those pieces, take pieces from everybody around you. People are always teaching, and you can always grow, always learn.
On the flip side, do you mentor and coach other individuals in the space? Like, do you find joy in mentoring and coaching other individuals that are more in an entry level role?
I do. I love opening people's minds to things. A lot of people are nervous about bartending per se. Like, I run into that a lot. People are like, well, I don't know. Should I take a class? No, I just learn it. Go in, ask questions, start talking to people. I'll mess with bartenders all the time and throw a weird curveball from a cocktail recipe from 1920, and it's not even a cocktail bar. And it's just fun because people look at you like you're crazy, and at this point, I know them, and they just laugh and shake my head, and they leave and walk away. But I love coaching people, and anytime I see a brand and they're like, oh, well, we got this new brand, I go, well, tell me about it. And if they don't know, I'll look it up and I'll go, all right, so this is what it is. Do you know anything like that? And we'll have a 5-minute conversation when they're bored and doing stuff like that. And I love that because I love the passion behind the brand. And I think every brand deserves its day in the spotlight.
So it's about the story. So brand is about the story. So we've got another question popping in here. Jason is submitting all sorts of fun questions. He says, from a growth standpoint, where do you want your company to be within the next year?
We have a lot of high hopes in the next 12 months. There's a lot going on now. We've only touched base on the 100 proof side of things is what we do here. And our umbrella company is WEC Nashville. And we have about, I believe it's 8 verticals underneath us currently. And
so I'm going to pop that. If you're tuning in, it's www.wecnashville.com.
Yeah, so we have a lot of things in the works, and being in operations and a little bit on that startup side of things. In 12 months, I see us with a hefty portfolio, being able to go into multiple states, and traveling, and we're importing, and we're growing in the right transition with this specific brand. With our marketing company, we got the right people involved in that, and then I kind of oversee the whole thing. But mainly that's on Jordan's shoulders, and whenever he needs help, that's who he calls. I go in and I just tell him, treat me like your secretary, because I don't have an ego. I don't care. Whatever needs to be done, just let me know. How can I help? And I think that we have a good synergy together, so we're able to attack what we need to attack in a timely manner.
So this is critical because when we launched Sports to Suits, Rupa and I are so vastly different, but we work super well together and we're able to get things done. So I know that it's so critical on sports teams, like the dynamic and the relationships and the trust is just so important. How do you translate that over to business? Because to me, it's not very different. I did an individual sport, even though I was part of a team. But I would imagine a lot of those principles, as far as soccer and basketball and baseball, it all plays very similarly into the dynamics in business and entrepreneurship. Like, everybody has to grit and grind, and it's not a sexy thing. It's hard work. Everybody has to step in, work together. So talk about the dynamics of like how your team is functioning and how you're leveraging, because you're both athletes, how you're leveraging that in the entrepreneurship space.
Yeah, I mean, we will always have struggles no matter what you do. And I think Jordan and myself had the exact same uh, mindset in the way we did things. And when something needed to be done, we would just do it. And that was not necessarily always a good thing because you put everything on your shoulders and you go. But because of our friendship going into this, which is also a strange way to do things. A lot of people tell you not to go into business with your friends, but we've had a good synergy together because we're open to having these conversations, and we don't judge each other for saying how we feel in a situation. We're just trying to support each other and create something special.
So let's talk about that, because Rupa and I have been best friends for a long time. And also, we have heard you don't need to go in business with your best friend and the dynamics with that. But I have found quite the opposite. We work well together. We communicate very well. We're also very honest with each other. And I think that this is important in teams, regardless of whether or not it's your best friend or if it's, an established team. I mean, trust is critical. And I think that with a friend, that should hopefully exist. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the building trust, we kind of had a leg up on the competition. You go into a role and you could take this effort and somebody goes, oh, I'll just do it for a year and a half. And they already know that they're going to exit. And then you're stuck not knowing what you're going to do in a year and a half from now. And we know that we're in this together. We've had these conversations. We're not shying away from any conversations. We don't, we don't care if we hurt each other's feelings. We don't. Like we yell at each other all the time, but guess what? 5 seconds later, we shake hands and hug it out. And that's something that you can't do if you're not friends with your business partner. And I think that us being able to do that day in and day out is kind of special.
Well, in teams, so in corporate teams, you can't necessarily yell at each other.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
So what is some words of wisdom that you would give to, because you've worked in large teams and larger companies before, and you guys have a large company as well. So how, from an interdisciplinary team perspective, what are some things that if people are struggling with that cohesion, what are some words of advice or recommendations you would provide to them?
There's a lot kind of flowing through my head there, but I truly just ask. Open the line of communication and truly just say how you feel. Don't wait till it's too bad that you're just angry about it or you're frustrated or you can't figure this out. There in the big corporations, there's always somebody that you can ask that can get you the answer or at least help you coach and develop. And I don't think you should ever shy away from asking a dumb question because there are no dumb questions. I've asked a lot of them in my life that I thought were dumb, but I got an answer and, figured it out from there. So,
well, and as a leader, you have to be willing to accept feedback from your team, words from your team, maybe the good, bad, and ugly, but be in a position where you're there to listen, to listen, to communicate, to support your team. Not everything is going to go perfect all the time. Like that's just not the nature that business is. So it's important to, as a leader, supporting a team, to be open and honest and accept feedback from your teammates.
Yeah.
We've got another question. So Jason's killing it on the questions today. So how important is understanding the value in separating facts versus emotions? So this is a great question when you're in business with your friend or family member or anybody in general, but this is extremely critical when you're talking about being in business with your friend.
Yeah, that's it's difficult. There's times that your emotions get the better of you, and as long as you're able to have a conversation in a calm manner afterwards, clear the air, make sure you guys are on the same page, you're okay. Facts are driven, absolutely, and that kind of helps you focus and keep your path straight. But your emotions will get the better of you, and if you accept the fact that it will happen and you don't do it in a bad manner and you just have a civilized conversation with it, you can kind of alleviate a lot of those emotions before they happen.
So, and we're all human. Like we all make mistakes. I think that that's something that is incredibly important to think through is we're all human. We all make mistakes. It doesn't matter if you're in a leadership role, you will make mistakes. I think being in a team where you're supporting each other through not just the wins, but also sometimes the losses because it happens.
Yep.
That's something from a principles of sports that you can carry very much over to business is supporting not just through the wins and losses. And you said it earlier. it's not always going to be hunky dory. But it's kind of the lessons learned. So you touched a little bit earlier on that and how you're not always winning.
Yeah, and you got to take the losses in stride. And if you truly learn from your losses, I promise you will be successful. And it might not be in what you think it's going to be in right now. I mean, I thought my whole life, my whole goal was going to own and run a restaurant forever. It's not where I'm at today.
So
But
you and I both share in non-traditional career pathways. So especially around education. So I didn't graduate college straight out of school. I went into the corporate world, and then I eventually got a college degree at WGU, which is a non-traditional competency-based educational program. And so I know you as well have not gone the traditional education route because you were wanting to go into the labor force. But your pathway, you're still an entrepreneur, you're still in a leadership role. So, what are your thoughts around non traditional education, and how do you go about incorporating continuous learning into your journey, even though you don't necessarily have a college degree?
yeah, I think that everybody's got to make a decision for themselves at some point in their life. And you got to, as long as the thing that it taught me was whatever decision I make, I'm stuck with it and see it out, see it through. Would I change things and go back and go to college? I wouldn't say that at all. I'm happy with the route that I took because I'm here now. I'm happy. I'm somewhat successful and growing and doing what I need to do. But being able to have those conversations with my father, and he ran uh, kind of a regional director position for a large orthotics prosthetics company for a long time. So I got to see him coach his team and be supportive of these people. And he had a fun nickname, and he'll probably kill me for saying this, but they used to call him the Pocket Doherty. And anytime they had a question about anything in the company, given whatever, anybody in the entire company could just call him. And the majority of the time he'd have the answer. If not, he knew who did. And he'd have his bosses calling him, new people that have never met him. And he answered the phone and he got the information, however it needed to be done. He didn't think of it as work. He thought of it as a team. And that's one thing that stood out for me my whole life. And that's why I knew upper management and everything like that was something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Well, that's not something that traditional education teaches you.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's a that's a different skill set, right? That's, being, not having all the answers, navigating how to figure out how to get questions answered, who to go to. Like, those are things that are soft skills that you learn in the labor force or you learn from other people.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of things that you can get from the traditional method of school and schooling and everything. And I completely support that as well. But things work differently for people. People learn differently. I learned by doing it. If you sat me in a classroom and tried to teach me how to bartend, I'd never be able to do it. I'd never be able to tell people how to do it. And I realized that after high school that when I walked into a class, I was miserable. I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to listen to anything. And I didn't care about anything being taught. I wasn't retaining any information. So I didn't want to waste my time. And I tried it. I attempted college. Don't get me wrong. I did.
Me too. I
I,
finished.
I tried to go to Southern Illinois Carbondale for a couple months, and there was a lot more alcohol involved than schooling. So wasted a little bit of money there, and just went straight to work. Started paying my dad back for the money that he gave me to go to college, and kept going from there.
So this is a fun question. So what is your favorite cocktail? What are you like on right now? Like, give me your top 1, 2, 3 favorite cocktails.
Oh, that is a loaded question. Truthfully, I'm not going to get too technical with it, but truthfully, it depends on the time of the year or what the weather is and what kind of establishment I'm in. But if I don't say Jameson ginger ale, I think every single person I've ever met in my life will call me a liar. So I drank Jameson ginger ale for a very, very long time. Got to tour the distillery out there, and it was beautiful. If everybody listening has never been, it's a bucket list. It's a really cool thing to do. That's kind of my go-to. Right now, a little untraditional way of doing things. I drink vodka and water, regular water, still water with a lime, just for the being out and about, low calorie concepts along the lines of that. And then I'd probably have to say beer. just because the amount of sports that I do, sitting outside, swimming, playing golf every weekend. It's just something about being out in the sun, having a beer out on the boat or something. It's different. And it kind of lightens the mood a little bit for me. So everybody's got that specific thing. I don't do seltzers, which a lot of people are in love with. I don't see the purpose behind them. So those really like 1, 2, 3 kind of concepts right now, but I am a huge agave fan. So I will drink tequila every day, all day if I really wanted to. But
we do
like
not
I said,
condone drinking on the show.
yeah, no, do it responsibly, drink responsibly. I promise.
So I want to talk about, so you mentioned like the importance of branding, and I know that you guys are very much in that space, and I don't necessarily mean branding around just the the distribution side of things or like the hospitality side of things, but what are some brands that stand out to you and why? It could be a brand, it could be whatever from whatever industry, but I'm curious, one, what are some brands that stand out to you, and two, why?
Well, one of the main brands that kind of stood out for me was actually a canned wine company out of California called Bev. And when I worked for the distribution house in Middle Tennessee, we had their brand when they launched in this market. And meeting that team and their passion behind it was really cool because it was all female owned. They were changing the way wine was consumed, putting it in cans, and people were saying it'd never work. And I'm not going to name drop a lot of the people, but there's such a phenomenal team, the passion behind it. And it's all bright pink. And they did a rosé, a Sauvignon Blanc, and a Pinot Gris on their initial launch. They're 250 milliliter cans. They're in the market. They love it. They're disruptive in the distribution side of the world where everyone's like, well, you have to do this, button up, wear a tie. And they're like, no, we're going to go around and we're going to throw a party on the beach and we're going to make frosé machines and do all this fun, energy loving things. Break the glass, like put perspective on the female entrepreneurship and creative in the C level. Sorry. And that was really cool to see because I've never experienced that before. And that's probably the one brand that really stood out to me.
So what's another one outside of the beverage industry?
Outside of the beverage industry, let's see.
So for example, somebody asked me this question on a podcast I did with them, and she asked, when you were young, what was the first brand that really resonated? And I said, Thai Beanie Babies. Like, it's the silliest thing, but do you remember the Beanie Babies?
Yeah, I do.
So with the tags, and the reason being is because instinctually, I love entrepreneurship, even at a younger age, and I could sell them. I could buy them, collect them. We played with them, and then we could sell them. And so that brand growing up in the 90s was like the first brand that I remember being enthralled with. It was because of the story, because of the collection, because you could sell them. So I'll ask you that question and take her question. But like, what's a brand that like truly resonated with you as a kiddo?
Probably Nike, and in other countries of the world, Nike. And it's kind of fun to say, but every time I turned around, Nike was coming out with the next new big thing. And I never understood how it was a thing. And being a huge Michael Jordan fan and him signing those deals and Tiger Woods in golf and just finding all these things that people kind of changed the way marketing was done in that regard was kind of cool seeing it grow. And of course, the only shoe I ever wanted was Nike. And I'm sure a lot of people at my age can kind of connect to that as well. But I loved what they did. And, that was kind of one of the brands that have always stood with me forever.
Well, and if you're listening, drop a brand in here. None of these brands are sponsored. Like, we're just talking brand and all of that good stuff. But it's fascinating to me because a lot of what you're talking about, there's mission, impact. Like, it's not just about a logo. It's more about the mission, the backing, the story, the emotion behind what they're coming to market with. And I see a lot of brands that come to market and you just know straight out of the gate, this brand stands for something. And so we're seeing a lot of that even translate over to like social enterprises and, how are people making an impact with the company that they have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I want to ask you one more question and then we will wrap it up. So
Sure.
What are some things Nashville has grown like crazy? And you guys, and I asked Jordan this last week, but you being in the hospitality industry, what are some things that are coming up that you are super excited about in the Nashville community?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I was able to go see Garth Brooks over at Nissan Stadium for the first time ever a couple weeks ago, and it was really cool. And I mean, every time I turn around, the CMA Fests are here. They're doing Live on the Green, going to a Preds game, a Titan Stadium's right there, and just seeing everything that's going on Broadway with the new places popping up all over town. Every time I turn around, there's a new list of places to go, and there's just so much to do.
Well, what do you think about Getus Park?
Oh, I love it.
We didn't talk about that.
We
I
have
mean,
not
shout out to Nashville Soccer Club, John Ingram. Like they literally the first game was what, May 1st-ish?
Yeah, just a couple.
It was that weekend. I can't remember the exact date, but I mean, it is like the largest dedicated soccer stadium in the US, I believe, right?
Yeah, the largest. Yeah, and it's amazing except for the parking, but as I'm sure you've seen.
That's all of Nashville.
Yeah, they're I guess I saw something, I think they towed like 9 cars and gave 60 tickets, but you see the people living around in the area renting out their space on their lawn for parking during the games because there's just no space, and that's the one thing they need to work on in the near future. But the stadium, the pictures, I was attempting to try to go to the next game, but unfortunately I'm not able to make it. But it is a bucket list in the near future to go and support that team and everything that they stand for, because it's really cool what they're doing.
With you being a former elite level soccer player, like I would imagine that just like that is your element, like going in and just being in that environment. Like we went to a couple of Nashville Soccer Club games when they were over at the stadium, the Titan Stadium, and it was amazing. So I'm super excited as well to go and attend one of those games. And I talked to somebody that flew in from Philadelphia to come to the game for the opener when they played Philadelphia, and he was like, all he talked about was how amazing that experience was. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I'm over the moon pumped to go. I know a lot of people that have went, and they're very judgmental that I haven't been there yet because they know my background, but I'm getting there. we'll get there sooner than later. But it's I'm so excited to do it again. I haven't been to an MLS game since I went to a Chicago Fire game back in Chicago, so it's been a very long time for me, unfortunately. Now I'm hoping, and what I see in the near future is them being able to get some of these huge games from Serie A or any of the international level games coming down here and being right across the street. That is something special that I'm really looking forward to in the near future.
Okay, so if anybody listening, I have one more question. I asked Jordan the same thing. What are 3 Nashville restaurants that you just absolutely have to go to? It's hard. It is so hard to select some, but people ask me all the time, what's good Nashville food, because they come into town and they want to know where the locals eat, right? There's a lot of stuff downtown, but where are your 3 spots to go?
Yeah, I'm a big, I go all across the board. To narrow it down to 3, it's very difficult. I would have to say my favorite all-around restaurant is Fifth and Taylor in Germantown. It just hits every vibe that I want. You can go high-end wine, really cool, small appetizers, small plates and stuff, and very cocktail-driven as well. Beautiful patio, parking. It's got everything. It's right there. It's really unique. It's really cool. Great staff. And then I kind of want to go somewhat like if you do like barbecue, you got to go to like Edley's or Martin's. Kind of keeping that vibe together.
The Nashville vibe.
Yeah, the Nashville vibe. And then honestly, the third one's a little tough. I just recently, the only reason I'm going to say this is I was just there, is Barcelona.
Really? I've never been there.
I absolutely loved it. It was one of the better times that I've had in a restaurant in a while. And the bartender was phenomenal. We met 8 different people just sitting at the bar top, just grabbing some tapas, having nice Spanish wines, had a couple different French options and stuff. I'm a big wino. I love drinking wine with my food and stuff. And it was a good day out and about, met a few people, people were laughing and telling jokes, and it wasn't too uptight, and the prices were great. And I truly never thought that I would say that would be one of them, but it truly is.
Well, and this is coming from subject matter experts. So if you're listening in, definitely, if you're in the Nashville area, check out some of these locations, because Nashville is getting known for incredible food. And we're just growing like crazy. And this is coming from somebody that has significant experience in this space.
Yeah, I have an entire list on a note in my phone for people that are coming into town. Got a couple friends like, any recommendations? And it's massive. I mean,
It's huge. I mean, there's so many cool places. There's a place in Donaldson called Nectar Cantina.
yeah.
And Nectar is a super cool place. It's kind of like you wouldn't know where it is located, or you wouldn't even probably come across it, but it's a good local place with incredible, just very fresh food. So
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that bar. They got a really cool patio out in the summer. They put live music and stuff out there. Great margaritas, all fresh ingredients. They're good people over there. And then I'd shoot myself in the foot if I didn't mention Craftsman on the Hill. They are my buddy owns it. They're good people, so I'm not doing a plug, but they're the world's largest dart bar. So if you're into dart,
well, and we're not promoting or sponsoring anything. This is just subject matter expertise in the Nashville community.
Yeah, I'm a big dart person. I'm a bar game guy. Like sports, pool, darts. I mean, you name it. Cornhole, bags, wherever part of the country you're listening from. I know that's always a fun debate, but they have everything, and they're really cool. They hold tournaments. They got leagues, and it's a really cool site. I believe they were in the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest dart bar, and it's in our hometown.
Wow. Well, and I can't thank you enough. I mean, we have talked all over the place: sports, hospitality, entrepreneurship, operational stuff, like all over the place. So I can't thank you enough for joining in and sharing all of this incredible tips and tricks with the listeners. I know that they've learned a lot from you. I have definitely learned a lot from you. And if you're listening in, this is the first time you and I have ever really had a conversation. So we're just getting to know each other, which is really exciting. Yeah, so for people that are listening that want to connect with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you? You get phone numbers.
You just go on our websites, on our contact info. They're Nashville. Just look at the team. You can contact us individually. If there's a specific, you can just hit me in contact. You can hit Jordan. You can see the whole team, depending on what avenue that you're looking for. I definitely recommend doing it that way. That's the easiest way to contact us.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks again. And for everybody that tunes in every week, thank you so much. If you're new, these conversations I have about every Tuesday. Some days they're a little bit different based on schedule, but I try to have them every Tuesday from 1 to 2 o'clock p.m. Central Time. So definitely tune in next week. I always have incredible people like Brendan on the show, and we talk all sorts of different topics. And hopefully you walk away learning some incredible lessons from these awesome people. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
Bye.